You know, I live in the border, right with Mexico. It's called the Rio Grande Valley. And early on, when I started my religious life, I was very involved with refugees and immigrants because the Border Patrol would always bring them to our house, and we would care for the families. And so early on, I learned a very important lesson in my life, and that was that when we were helping at Casa Oscar Romero in Brownsville, we had a lot of families from Salvador and from Nicaragua back then in the 80s, and thousands of them, complete families would come from all over, and we would help them. And during that time, I asked myself this question: why do something? You know, why get involved? Why help? And my response is my life, how I got started. And it goes back to those times when I was there in Casa Romero. I was with Sister Juliana Garcia, one of my she was my mentor. She passed away 2 years ago. But she taught me a lot. And my very first lesson that she taught was this. We were going to lunch one day in our busy schedule, and we were overseeing the house of many refugees there at Casa Romero. And that one day, during lunch, Sister Juliana told me, let's stop at the congressman's office because there's some people protesting because $1 million are sent to El Salvador every single day to support the war there. And they're helping the people we're trying to help. So let's go show our support. They were planning to do civil disobedience at the end of the day when the office closed and not go to make a statement. So we went to show our support, believe what they were doing was the right thing. So we show up there at this office, and the people were praying, waiting for the congressman to respond and answer why. Why is it that you are in favor of sending $1 million a day to El Salvador to destroy these communities? And so while we were just arriving and we were there, the manager of the building decided that he didn't like what was going on, so he was going to shut down the building. And what was supposed to happen at 5 happened right then, there, when we were there at noontime. Wow. Sister Juliana turns around and tells me everybody was going to get arrested. Police cops came in and was taking everybody. And she tells me, Norma, we cannot just run away. If you stand for something, you have to stand for what you say you believe. So it's either you or I, but one of us has to go back and run the house. So you decide. That was tough, because I was in my early 20s. And so I said, I guess it's me. So I got arrested. It was very difficult to do that. But I learned my first lesson in life, that no matter what, you have to stand for what you believe. So I went to court, and the prosecutor found me guilty for 5 years. And the whole case was later on appealed right away and dismissed for technicalities, or I don't know, I don't understand the legal system, but I didn't have to go to jail. Soon after that, I got a call from a professor from the university, and he said, Sister, will you come speak to my students at the university to my class? And I said, yes. So I showed up, and I spoke to the class, and then he tells me afterwards, he said, I want to share something with you. The prosecutor who found you guilty was my student at one time. And she came to see me after the trial. She was ashamed, and she was crying. And she said, I feel horrible because I was forced to find her guilty because otherwise I would have lost my job. She, meaning me, stood for what she believed, and I did not. Those were very good words for me because it reaffirmed that when we stand up and for what we believe and make a difference, it is the right thing to do. So what we started in the valley, what we helping the immigrants, as you saw through the video, it happened in 2014 when we had so many children coming to our border, thousands of them. And for some reason, the United States was not ready to handle so many kids, unaccompanied children, very tiny ones, 2, 8 at the most, 5, 6 years old. Many of them, and there's a process to follow, and the Border Patrol, when they apprehend them, when they process them, they hold them in this facility that's very small. It only holds 300 people at one time because it's not conditioned to have like cafeteria food or showers or anything like that. They're processed and they go within a day or less. But because they were children, there's a different process to follow with children that are unaccompanied. They have to be turned on to a different department to handle and protect the children. So in the meantime, they were forced to keep them there for not one day, not 1 week, but several weeks, possibly even a month. In those conditions where their children were way over 1,000 of them in there. And they were small. And I was fortunate to go and visit this processing facility because I got permission. Nobody could go in there. And I was able to go in. And when I went in, I saw the children in those cells that had a big window glass. And I asked the officers, "Can you give me permission to go inside with the children?" And they really didn't want me to, and said no. And I said, "Well, I want to pray with them." And that was magical. They said, "Okay, go in." It works. So I go in there, and the children were all around me, crying, dirty, muddy, scared, telling me, "Sácame de aquí. Get me out of here, please. No puedo respirar. I can't breathe. Help me." These were kids, tiny ones, all over me, and here in the United States. I just couldn't understand how that could be possible. How we, the most powerful nation in the United States, in the world, could not have a better option for these kids. When I walked out of there, the officer in charge tells me, "Sister, thank you. Thank you for helping us realize they're human beings." I can never forget that moment. I carry it with me because it reminds me constantly of the importance of speaking up and being present and doing something to make sure that that does not happen again. To be a voice. You know, the community back home in the Rio Grande Valley has been very overwhelmingly positive about helping. What I did was not me, was all of us. We all came together to say yes, to help. Thousands and thousands of families that have come through and continue to come to the border asking for help, asking for protection. It's amazing how everyone, every single faith denomination, from the city government to the county governments, even to the Border Patrol, working together to respond humanely to the human reality that we're seeing there at the border and helping these families. My mission has been to help everyone see that they are people And we must not forget that. They are hurting and they're fleeing a country that is in great turmoil, and they're afraid for the lives of their kids. That's why there's so many children. The stories we hear time and time again, why they come. And you see mothers with their children, 1 child, 2 child, sometimes up to 4 or 5. And the stories are so similar. They come because they're afraid for their child, because of the gangs and the violence and the fear that their children may be taken. And that's why they're here. I remember the story, and I share this story so often. This mother back then in 2014, how she was pregnant, tiny, petite, Honduran mother, and I looked at her, it was almost midnight, and back then we stayed very late, helping the families as they arrived. And I said, "When are you due?" And she says, "Yeah." It's now. I said, "Wow. Why would you come like that?" And she had a little 3 or 4-year-old daughter with her. And she said, "I came for her." And she showed me her hand, and her hand was all destroyed. And she said, "You see this? It happened because some guy came into my house and tried to kill my daughter, and I put my hand to save her. So if I stay, I'm afraid for her life." And like that story, we have hundreds of stories, if not all of them, of how a mother says, "My teenage daughter can't go to school, can't go outside. She has to stay home because if she goes out, we're afraid they will take her." These are the stories, and these are the reasons why so many families come and why they're here. And they're here, and they tell me sometimes they're illegals, and I say they're not really illegals, they're not. I don't see how a person can be an illegal person. It's a human being. I think that there is a lot of propaganda in trying to help us think that they're not human beings. But it is our job to speak up and be a voice and let people hear the fact that they're people. You know, back in when I was in Casa Romero in the 80s, I needed to buy a Xerox machine. And I share this because a lot of people may not be in favor of what we do. And we hear this a lot about the importance of securing the border and making sure that they don't come and building walls and sending them back. And that's true that we must secure our borders and we must secure our country. But we also must remember that there's another part to it, and that is that they're people and they're human beings and they need help. We must do both. Back in Casa Romero, I needed to buy a Xerox machine, and this lady comes over to sell me the Xerox machine, and she says, "Sister Norma, I'm going to sell you the Xerox machine only because I'm a businesswoman, but I want you to know that I am 100% against what you do here. All these people should just go back, should not come into this country. It's our country and we don't want them here." And I said, "Let me tell you what I do and why I do it." So I walked her through the grounds of the house. And when we got back, she turns back to me and tells me, "Sister, I am 100% in favor of what you do." Yes. So there is hope. I think we need to speak up. I think we need to share these stories. We need to tell people why we do what we do and why it's important to help these families and not send them back. You know, we've had so many volunteers come to our respite center in McAllen, Texas, thousands of them. And every single one that shows up and helps or transforms, something wonderful happens. I believe that Sacred Heart has become holy ground, where immigrant families arrive in great pain, in great need of help. And the moment they go through the doors of Sacred Heart, you see them break into tears of joy, unbelief, that they're volunteers, they're people clapping and saying, bienvenidos, welcome, and showing compassion. And the families bring their faith. Immediately they'll kneel down if they see an image of Jesus and thank God for being there. I've heard so many stories of people that have helped, how that have changed their lives. Just recently I heard one of somebody from another church tell me, he said, you know, sister, what you started here and what you're doing here in McAllen has really touched so many people. I have a friend who was a very successful attorney, and after coming here and helping, he left his profession and he joined the seminary. Amazing. And I have a family recently sent me a letter, and he says, sister, my whole family came to help at the respite center. My wife and my 10-year-old and my 14-year-old. And my wife and my daughter were helping the families inside, helping them get their clothing and getting them ready so they can go take a shower. And myself and my little boy, 14 years old, we were outside in charge of the showers to make sure every shower was clean for every family that arrived, and would give them a towel and the shampoo, whatever they needed. And we received this lady that had 2 daughters, and she said, I started dialoguing with her, and the mother shared with us that they had gone for 18 days walking through Mexico, trying to get to the border with Mexico, with the United States. And when they arrived, they were left there, abandoned by the trafficker, the coyote. And when they arrived, they were waiting to see for the right moment to cross over the river into the United States. And when they were waiting there for 3 days, I believe he said, they saw this little girl, 8 years old, in the bushes by herself, who was also abandoned by the coyote. So they took the child and they helped her to cross. So she said that the daughter of one of the daughters took that child, the 8-year-old, and started to cross the river with the parents. But the current was so strong that he just pushed her away, and she was not able to reach out and save her. Her older daughter, with the little girl of 8 years old, was just drafted away. So she was so scared, and her daughter was going to die. And so she started to pray. And she saw that her daughter eventually ended up at the shore of the United States. So they were able to help them and make sure they regained consciousness, and they were fine. And as they were sharing that story, he was telling me that his son and him were so amazed at what the family went through to get there, and how horrible the mother felt because she knew nothing about this little girl anymore, because Border Patrol separated them and took the child and set her aside, and she was worried for her. So Miguel, the dad, said, let us pray. Let us pray for that little girl. And they prayed together. And that evening, when they went home, Miguel's son says, Father, Dad, I'm sorry. I'm sorry for what? I'm sorry for all the things I've always asked you, whether it's a phone or this or that. You know, these families, they give up everything. They lose everything, all for a chance in life. It's amazing that's what happens there at Sacred Heart. It makes us realize how blessed we are and how important it is for us to do something, to be there. When our Holy Father was in Mexico, there's something that he said that is, stay with me. And that is, he said, when he arrived to Our Lady of Guadalupe in Mexico City, he said, the only force capable of moving the heart of man or women is the tenderness of God. I believe that is what happened to that lady from the Xerox machine and everyone else that closes their heart and does not want to see the importance of welcoming the stranger, these families who are asking for our help. I think that it is our job to help, and we can do that together. We can do that by joining forces and speaking up and making a difference in what is important in life. Because the way I see it, they're part of the human race. They're part of who I am and who we are. So it is our responsibility to do something so we can make a difference and work together to what is noble and what is right. So don't ever lose hope. Thank you.